Alright, this is Rob back with another video. This will be a drawing video. So, the materials, I forgot to leave this open. It's going to be light right now. Let's get this off of here so I can show you the type of sketchbook. So, this is the Strathmore brand. You can get it at Michael's or you can order it. It's an 18 by 24, so it's large enough for pretty much all your purposes, even figure drawing. I always like getting the one that says drawing. I recommend getting the one that says drawing, because if you get the one that's I believe has a yellow cover and it says sketch or sketching, it's cheaper, but it's a more inferior paper, and so it's just not as good. I would get the one that says drawing, and there's two of them. This is the I just bought this not too long ago. It has this drawing of a flower and kind of a landscape of some little buildings, but the drawing can change. Get the one that says drawing, and there's two types that say drawing. This is the white one, and then there's the one that has almost like a yellow, I don't know, eggshell, I guess, color to it. If you want it to be, if you want that sort of thing. They had a special going on where buy one, get the other one half off or free or something. So I ended up buying one of each. So the only difference again is that this one's the white one. The other one is more like a yellow. It has like it almost looks like older paper because it kind of has like a yellowy sort of tone to it. And this is a Stabler set I had purchased a while back at Michael's. I believe I ordered it or I got it from Michael. I can't remember. I think you can get this at Michael's. So again, you know, if you don't want to have to order or whatever, you can get this at Michael's. They got other sets. You don't need anything super expensive. I happened to buy that just because that's what they had at the time. Graphite is one of those things that, you know, I've never seen a really expensive pencil do something amazing and out of this world compared to the more cheaper pencil. Graphite is just, it's graphite, you know, it's not that wondrous. So even though it brings like, I don't know, whatever it says, 12 pencils or something, you don't need that many pencils. It's pretty ridiculous, you know, to go into 4H, 6H. I find all that to be just nonsense. I probably will stick to a sketching pencil. Will probably be like a B, something like this. So it's very, and it's dark enough that I can see it. So this is what I'm going to use. And then again, here's the grip that I use when I draw, whether it be in graphite or charcoal. I let it float in my palm and I grab my pencil like so and make my mark. And what that does, it allows me to erase very easily the lines that I don't want, mistakes, stuff like that. The other tool I'll be using is just a little barbecue skewer, little shish kebab skewer, and this is just to measure proportions, which is I'm going to try my best to cover today. If you hear any noise in the background, I apologize. Probably my dog doing her thing. Some sort of blending stump, you know. Here's a tortillion. I don't really like these. These are the little hollow ones. This is like basically it's rolled up newspaper. It's not really my favorite, but whatever you got. This is not as good in my opinion as the stumps, but essentially they're the same thing. So I'm gonna set that aside, and the other tool I'll be using is little, I call them clicky erasers because you can click on them, they look like pens, right? Either this one is one I like, but here's one that's become pretty popular also. Here's one, if you can just tell that this is just a lot thinner than this, but they're essentially the same thing. And they're a hard white eraser. Don't buy those cheap 99-cent clicky erasers that are about twice as fat as this. They're like a 1/4 inch thick. Because what happens is they're very flimsy. The eraser isn't as stiff, and so you can't sharpen it with a knife like I did to both of these. You can't sharpen it to a point and have it hold its point. The point's just gonna do this on you, and so it's worthless. That is not my main eraser. You don't want to use a hard white eraser. I'll give you an example. I got it in my little Ziploc bag because that way, whenever I travel and I put it in with my charcoal equipment, I don't want to get dirty. So here's a little trick: you get a little bag, a little Ziploc bag, and you keep your eraser in there. Rarely, this is I don't even know how many years, and you can see it's still in great shape and it's not very worn away. And the reason I hardly ever use this, you want to use this, a kneaded eraser, okay? This is what you want to use, and the reason is this won't damage your paper the way a white eraser would, right? This here is so stiff and it's so hard, right? It's gonna damage your surface, especially for those of you that have a hard time controlling your pressure. This won't damage it as much. This will take off more, especially for those of you that press hard. So the best thing to practice isn't, you know, just what I'm about to show you in drawing. It's also to practice the way you hold a pencil, the way I just showed you a few minutes ago. That'll prevent miniature Grand Canyons all over your paper, you know, where you just dug it in and you got all these carved lines basically. And so no matter what you do, you're not gonna make that go away. So use a kneaded eraser and light pressure. You can use what do you call that? A sharpener. Okay, some people use sharpeners. Sometimes, a lot of times, I just like to use a blade, like a little razor blade. There's a little pack you can buy. I like using razor blades because it gets me, I think, a better point. And then I like to sometimes use a nice big fluffy brush, and this isn't for blending really. This is just so when I do use the hard white eraser from my little clicky eraser things here, I can just kind of do this and it doesn't smudge. You don't want to go like this with your hand, which is a bad habit that we all have from school, because your hand will smudge. And then I'll just use a napkin, just any old napkin, and I'll put that under my hand so I can prevent my sweaty hands and the oils from your fingers and stuff from touching it and potentially smudging your drawing. Got my dog by my feet here. Go ahead, Minnie. Go play. So that's it. You don't need a whole lot for drawing, which is why graphite drawing of any kind is such a great advantage over, say, painting or, you know, any kind of painting. You need more stuff, mediums, water, oil, whatever. So you can do this anywhere. It's just a fun time. So our subject here is a friend of mine, fantastic lady by the name of Carol. Thank you, Carol, for this picture I was able to take of her. Hope you don't mind me using your picture. Probably kill me when you see me. So what's the first step? What's the first step to do our drawing? Well, first step is to look at the orientation of your subject. In portraiture, it's gonna be naturally just vertical, right? But if you were doing figure work and the person was, say, laying down on a bed or laying sideways or something, that would change things dramatically, because now that makes that person wider than they are tall, right? If they're laying down, so you would want to orientate then your paper sideways. So obviously she's oriented vertically, right? Typical of portraiture. So then step 2 is to orientate my surface here vertically, just like her. So it's rectangular paper, just bigger. I orientate my paper in the same fashion. So it's vertical. Right there, saved you tons of headaches, okay? If I did the portrait on a paper that was turned sideways, it would have just a lot of negative space on either the left or right, and it just wouldn't look as nice. It would just be an awkward looking drawing, whereas vertical, we just tend to look at it and say, that makes sense. The next step in drawing, okay, is the highest and lowest point. In this case, we're going to call the highest point the top of her hair right here, and the bottom of her chin is going to be the lowest point. Now I take that idea, right, not its size, I can care less how big it is, and then I decide over here, how big do I want to draw my beautiful friend Carol? So I say I'm going to draw the top of her head right there, and I'm going to put the bottom of her chin right here. I didn't measure this. This is just a decision I made using common sense, okay? I want to draw her head that big. That gives me more than enough room for her shoulder lines. Okay, here, right, for her, the top of her shoulders is going to be perfect. And her collar, and if I wanted to include some of that black t-shirt she's got on, I could include some of that. And this picture, I actually took it from a little bit further away. This is me after I cropped it. I zoomed in and cropped it. So if I wanted to really include even more, I could, right? This is not a picture of her hands eating pizza or whatever she's doing, drawing or whatever. This is about her. So I'm going to focus on her face. I'm not interested in her body so much. So I included enough of the body where we got enough wrinkles and interesting, wrinkles in the clothing and in the cloth here and the t-shirt and shirt and everything else. So it'll be much more intricate in that way. It'll take much more time, but it'll be much more interesting. It'll give me an opportunity to go into cloth. So this will be a long video more likely, and I'll try my best to speed things up, but this is going to be kind of like if I was in a classroom environment with you, showing you how to draw. And it wouldn't matter to me if this was a horse or a donkey or a peacock or a chicken or a dog. It's all the same thing. I find the highest and lowest points, right? And then you keep going. So if this was a horse's head, for example, it'd be the highest point on the horse, which would be the top of the mane there, or the top of the ears, whatever, and the bottom of the snout. If it was a lion, same thing. The dog, same thing. So it's all done in the exact same manner. So let's go into what's in between the top of her head and the bottom of her chin, right? We got her eyes, nose, and everything else we got to fit in there. So how do we do that? Well, first, let's see if there's a halfway point, right? Halfway between the top and bottom. That's usually the eye line, right? From pupil to pupil. But the problem is she's got her head turned to her left away from us, and then she's got it tilted down slightly. So that could throw that off significantly sometimes. So I'm just going to take a quick measurement here, like so. And I'm going to compare that from the pupils up. As you can see, from the pupils down to the chin, it's quite a bit smaller than from the pupils down to her, or from the pupil up to the top of her head, right? That's a lot bigger. So let's see if we can find a halfway point that's useful. Let's see if I can go to the top of the eyebrows to the chin, compare that. I just hold my pencil, and now that's too big. So the top of her eyebrows are a little bit higher right here. They're a little bit higher than the halfway point. So I'm just gonna guesstimate that, okay? Because that's closer to halfway. So let's find that halfway point. I said the top of the eyebrows were close to halfway, but it's actually slightly higher than halfway. So let's find out what halfway is here on my drawing surface. Let's do that. So I'm just going to eyeball halfway. I'm just going to say halfway looks to me from here to here to be about here roughly. Now, how do I know that's halfway? I'm just guessing, right? Could I check to see if that's correct? Simple. From the chin to the halfway point, I guessed. And then from the halfway point to the top of the chin, the top of the head. And I guessed it a little too low. So a little higher. This would get me a lot closer to correct. And so that's pretty darn close. That's good enough. So this is actually halfway. And I checked it in a very, I guess you could say scientific sort of way. That's pretty much dead center. Now we said the top of the eyebrows were a little bit higher. How much higher? Just a little bit. Now a little bit to me is going to be a little different than you depending on the size that you're drawing. So that's about just a tiny bit. So we could say roughly 60% of the bottom half and then 40% is the top half, roughly, if you use your top of your eyebrows as a reference. So I'm just going to guesstimate a little bit more than half, just a little bit. So I'm going to guesstimate that. And then I'm looking at the angle that her eyebrows are at, and I'm drawing that angle in. And so it's not too difficult. And I'm guessing it's about like that much. And so I just do a nice, very light, sketchy line. Because her head is slightly turned to her left, I want to make sure I use good compositional rules to make the best decisions. In portraiture, the compositional rule of space is try to leave more room in the direction that they're facing in. It just looks better. So because she's facing that way a little bit, I'm going to put her head slightly this way, leaving slightly more negative space that way. If you were to do the reverse, it would look really awkward. All this extra space of nothingness. You could center her, that's fine too. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'm going to put her a little off center just to be a little bit more artsy, you know, with a capital A. So now let's go from the eyebrows to the top of the head. And now what do we have up there that's worth mentioning? Well, really just a hairline. That's roughly around there. Where's this hairline? Is it halfway between the top and bottom of this space, right? Eyebrow to the hairline, and then hairline to the top of the head is a lot bigger. So this is another, you know, not quite in the center kind of space. So I'm going to say the hairline is about 40, and then from the hairline to the top of the head is about 60. So something like that. I'm just doing the best guesstimate I can. I'm trying to stay more or less like this, you know, with the hair is covering the forehead. I'm going to call that the hairline. And that's about, I think that's close enough. Now, from the eyebrows down to the nose, and then the mouth and the chin and the eye line, we need to figure out all that stuff. That's where the hard part is, or most of the work, I should say, not the hard part. So let's see if the nose, which is almost halfway, but not quite, is, you can see from the nose down to the chin is actually a lot smaller than the nose up to the eyebrows. So I'm going to say that this is once, twice, about a, let's say 40% or so, another one of those 40%. So I'm going to say from the eyebrow to the chin, this is about halfway. I'm going to say a bit lower, something around that. And what I noticed when I was over here doing this is that from the chin to the nose is the exact same size as the nose to the eye line. So that's important. So let's see if that works. And I'll just look at it visually here to see if that works. So from the nose, let me do this, to the chin, and then from the nose up to here would be the eye line. Now that doesn't look right, because this eye line, it's just too darn close to the eyebrow. So that could tell me right there, that kind of shows me I'm probably off. Not probably, I know I am. I know I am. So I'm gonna make this a little bit lower. Let's try that. Just a little bit adds up. Now that looks more like the distance that I'm seeing from the eyebrow to the eye line. Imagine those a line from pupil to pupil. You can draw it on your paper if that helps you. I suggest you do. So that looks more like that makes sense. Now how do we double check this little area here? How would you double check from the nose to the eyebrow that that's correct, right? How would you know that? How do you know that what you just said is true? Well, from the eyebrow to the pupil line, let's call it, or the eye line, is hopefully you can see the lines I'm making on our face here on your screen, is once, then do that same distance again, twice, 3 times. So basically, if I cut this up into 3, the top third would be the eye line. So this distance, and if I applied it again and then roughly again, hey, that's not too bad. So I just checked myself. I hope that wasn't too confusing. I know if you're new at this, it can sound a little bit confusing. And something I like to tell people is when you're drawing, you're not really learning to draw when you're trying to learn to draw. You're trying to learn how to see rather than learn how to draw. Because learning to draw, there's no one that can teach you how to draw. Learning to draw is you applying your pencil to a piece of paper, and that's called practice. That's learning to draw. But learning how to see is actually a much more accurate statement when it comes to learning how to draw. You're really learning how to see. So there's the nose line. And then what I do is very, very lightly, I draw a line like this, and I just put initials. NL, November Lima, for the nose line. EL for eye line. And if you don't do this lightly, you're going to end up having a bunch of initials all over your paper. And that's going to look like crap. EB for eyebrow, and then HL for hairline. I don't label the top of her head because it's the highest line. Why do I need it? I already know that it's the top of the head. I know there's a chin because it's the lowest line. That's pointless. This is just so I don't get confused, because sometimes that happens and you thought this was the eyeline, it turns out this is the eyeline, and your face is all warped and out of the place. So I suggest you label like that very lightly. You might not even see this on your screen. I put HL, EB for eyebrow, EL for eyeline, NL for nose line. If you can't see it, that's a good thing. That means I did it right. Now from the nose line to the mouth line is usually about a third of the way to the center of the mouth. Once, twice, a little bit more than a third on her. As you get older, your face starts to sag, skin starts to sag. So as you start drawing older people, keep that in mind. If somebody is younger, say a child, a very young child, they got bizarre proportions because the skull hasn't quite, it isn't done growing, and so the proportions are very strange and they're very off. But if you're drawing an adult, the mouth line is about a third of the way between the nose and the chin. You come down from the nose to the chin and you break that space into 3 equal spaces. That first third, that's where that mouth line is going to be 9 times out of 10. Sometimes someone's built a little different, but 9 times out of 10, it's a third of the way up from that space. So from the nose to the chin is about a third, maybe a little bit lower. So I'm going to just kind of eyeball that, and I'm going to say it's about that much. Another tip is keep all these lines parallel to each other. The only one that changes, which has to do with expression, is the mouth line. If you look from the corner of her mouth to the other corner across, my pencil is angled in the opposite direction as the eyebrows. So the eyes, the eyebrow, the eyes, the nose, they're usually parallel to each other. The mouth line's a little funky in that way. It can sometimes, you just don't want to be dramatic. It's a little off center. So I'm going to put horizontal and then a little off horizontal, just that little tiny bit. So I'm just going to try my best to simulate that slightly off center. I put my pencil just like that over it, and then I'm just going to initial this Mike Lima for mouth line. So when I get up to take a break and I come back tomorrow, next week, whenever, I can come back to this and say, oh, that was so-and-so's face. And I can look at these lines and say, oh, yeah, that's this, that's that, that's that, that's that. So that's another advantage to doing it this way. So let's go into the width of her face. Okay, the width of her head, her face, whatever you want to do. We did all the top to bottom lines. We got all the landmarks, right, that are worth mentioning, which are at the top of the head. Hairline, eyebrow line, eye line, nose line, mouth line, the bottom of the chin. That's everything that makes you, you. Now, for the width, it takes a little bit more know-how, a little bit more work, but it's not hard. It's very easy. We're going to do what's called comparative measurements. As the name implies, comparative measurements, we're comparing measurements. We're not comparing measurements in terms of feet, yards, miles, or inches. That is not what we're doing. We're just going to say, hey, this piece here is that big, and when I compare it, right? So you measured it, now you compare it, and you compare it to something on the vertical or the width or whatever, you say, wow, it's the same as this piece up here. So now on your drawing, that better be true, or you're not doing what that person looks like. You're not doing it right. Whether you're drawing from life, or like in my case, I'm using a photograph, the forehead is equal to, you know, say, this should be equal to something else. And in this case, it's almost the same as the nose. In fact, it's the same as the bottom of the nose to the chin. So those two pieces have to be equal to each other on my drawing. So when I go up to my hairline and eyebrow line, what we call a forehead, that needs to be the same size as my nose to chin. And it is roughly the same size. That right there is comparative measurement. So how do you do it here on this drawing? Well, excuse me, on this photograph. All I'm going to do is try not to get in the way of this camera, which doesn't make it easy. I always measure the width of the face. I don't like doing the entire head because the width of the face will give me a smaller distance to cover, and it makes it easier. So I'm just going to say from right here where the sideburns begin, I'm just going to make a line. Hopefully you can see that. From right there, I'm going to call that the edge of the face. I know that there's an ear and the jaw and everything else. I'll draw that, and I know it goes to the left of that line later on. But for right now, I'm going to call this the width right here. From here, and I'm gonna go all the way across to the flesh just beyond the eye. I understand that this eyebrow pops out and goes to the right of that line as it juts out, and so does this forehead, and then comes back in slightly. I understand that. I'm just gonna put from here to here, and that's it. Very, very simple. So I'm gonna go like this and say from that line to the edge of her flesh over there is that big. I hold my measurement. Now that I know how big it is, I hold that measurement and then I compare it. So I measured and now I compare. I put it down. I always start at the bottom of the chin, and it gets me to from the chin to just below her eyebrow line. It takes me to the center of the space right here. It gets me right into the middle. That little, I'm just gonna put a little dot for you right there. So from chin to that dot is the same as the width of her face that I explained just a second ago. Where is this dot? Well, it happens to lay, I'm gonna make it into an X. Hopefully you can see that on your video. This is right in, pretty much in the middle of the top of the eyebrows and your pupil line. I have an eyebrow line and an eye line. So I'm gonna go right into the middle of this space. I'm gonna draw a line across like that. And now I'm gonna say this, and I wanna draw it, remember I wanna draw her face a little bit this way. So I'm just gonna move over this way slightly. So here's my eyebrow line and my eye line. I drew a little line in the middle, down to the chin. I measure that because that's how wide her face needs to be. And now across the eye line is where I measured. So across the eye line is where I will place this measurement. I'm gonna go like this, and I'm looking at the finger to the edge of the paper, and from the tip of my stick to the edge of this paper here. And because I want it to be where she's kind of got a little bit more negative space, when I do the hair and the ear and the end of the jaw, she's gonna have her head come out to here. And so there'll be more negative space here. So I'm gonna call this good enough right there and right there. And so this, again, this left edge here, which is the right side of her face, is the edge of the sideburn where it meets her cheek. And this edge here is right next to the left eye, her left eye, that little piece of flesh. And then the bone structure here that comes away from that line and goes up like this. I'm just gonna start sketching that out a little bit. And here's the top of the eyebrows, and it goes in, and then it kind of goes relatively vertical-ish. Really tough to draw, talk, teach, measure, do all these things, and not get in the way of the camera. Sometimes I look at my videos and I gotta edit a lot because I find myself in front of the camera. So that's the edge of the forehead. I don't need this. Usually I don't worry about doing this right now, but I want to make sure that I know some of you at home sitting there going, what the heck's this guy talking about? I want to make sure you guys kind of get a sense of what it is I'm talking about. So this is that edge right here. And then it comes in, then it pops back out. How far does this cheek pop out? Well, I'm going to put a vertical plumb line. I'm going to use my stick here if it's a little thinner. Nice and vertical. And the cheek doesn't quite touch that stick. And that stick does touch her eyebrow. See that? Where that eyebrow pops out? But the cheek is a little to the left of that. So this pops out at my best guess just now. I'm going to put it nice and vertical. And I'm going to draw a little line to represent that. It pops out about this much. That cheek doesn't pop out as much. It stays away from it just a little bit. And so I'm going to stay away from that line. If I were to come out as far as this eyebrow bone structure on the eye was coming out, I'm sorry, I don't know the scientific name of it. I can't remember right now. It wouldn't look right. And then this comes back in right here. Where is that? I'll just use my stick. Again, I'm using a plumb line. And it comes in just a little bit. Roughly, this is the rough beginning stages. So all this will get changed. So it comes in about that much. Around that much. And above the nose line. So above the nose line, about there, and about here. And that's roughly where her face pops out. Now she's got glasses, so it's kind of amplifying and giving you a bizarre kind of funky angle. So it makes her bone structure look even more bony in a way because of that. And so she roughly about there, and then her jaw kind of comes again. Again, I don't usually go into all these little stupid edges right now. I don't like doing it. I'm doing it just for this video, okay? I usually go from the width of the face and I go right into the eyes, trying to figure out how wide they are. So let's do that now, because this, I believe, gives you a reference that this is the left side of her face, So just kind of, hopefully as you're watching this, it'll clear that up. So from the left to right, where do the eyes lay? Well, look at the distance from this edge here to the edge of this, or the corner of this eye. Significant, right? Now look at the corner of this eye to the edge of that flesh. It's tiny in the extreme. It's very, very small, about that much. So let's just do a little comparative measurement now. Let's measure from the edge of her eye over there to the corner of her eye over here, so we can get that whole width. And that's the same as, and then I'm just gonna put it vertical because I got already so many vertical measurements, something may lay there. And I'm just gonna go and see if I can find roughly mouth line to the pupil line, or to the eye line, are the same. So from my mouth line to my eye line is that much. Let me erase this little extra mark I made earlier. And you start leaving lines behind that you don't need, you'll start getting confused. So my eye line to mouth line, I take that, put it sideways, and then I'm just guesstimating that little tiny bit of flesh on this side. I'm gonna start there and just come over here, and I'm gonna make a mark. Now, before I start drawing eyes, I'm gonna sit back and compare. Look how big this piece of flesh is from the edge of her sideburn to the corner of the eye. Very large piece on this side over here on her right side. Kind of looks like a bigger version, because I'm drawing her bigger than the photograph. Looks like a slightly bigger version of that. But proportionally speaking, it makes sense, right? Here's another way for you anal types to check yourself. I can check this distance right here. This space is similar to, and then you can, so let's check this distance. This distance here is similar to, and then find something that looks to be same in size. And I just start at the bottom, work my way up. And I'm using the lines that I drew earlier to see if it, works. And it's almost the same size as the forehead, a little smaller. So something a little smaller than the forehead, from eyebrow to the top of their hairline there, the top of the eyebrow to the hairline. I'm gonna just kind of eyeball that, a little less than that, about that much less. This on my drawing should be, when I turn it sideways, similar to this distance. And when I put it on there, will you look at that? If that isn't dead on, I don't know what is. So I just checked myself on this space. So I'm pretty confident that the eye, her right eye, starts right there, the corner of her right eye. And then it carries over this distance over to the other corner. Now your eyes are basically, from the edge of one eye to the next, is 3 eyes. In other words, thirds. But because she's in a slight angle, here's the tear duct, and here's the tear duct roughly over there, and here's the corner of that eye. Do these look like thirds? They look pretty roughly the same. So I'm gonna break this space into thirds. This might take you a couple of tries. Let's see if I get lucky. I got lucky, I got it the first time. And so now this is her right eye, and this right eye should be, I'm just gonna kind of sketch an eye. Again, I don't like doing detailed stuff right now. I'm just trying to situate you guys with what I'm doing. And so I'm just doing a little almond shape. I'm not even gonna draw a proper eye or anything. I'm just gonna do an almond shape, just anything, a football, whatever, just something so you can kind of start getting a feel for what you're doing. Now let's go to the nose. The nose usually lays right between the tear ducts, but because her head is turned, it's kind of shifting things from what we normally see. So here's the tear duct of her left eye, but look at the edge of her nose. It pretty much, when I hold a straight plumb line, cuts the left eye in half. So I'm gonna go into the center of the left eye, and I'm gonna bring down a line like so. Now I know that's the edge of that nose. This edge here, now we got the left or the right edge, now we gotta do the left edge, corresponds with the tear duct for the most part. So I'm just gonna carry this tear duct down, and now I have the other edge of the nose. The mouth line, again, when somebody's looking directly at you and they're level with you, is usually from pupil to pupil. For women, it's slightly smaller in most cases. The corner of her eye is the corner of her mouth, right? I'm gonna say this right here is about a third of the way from the left edge of her right eye. So the corner of the eye, I'm gonna come in about a third, and there's that edge of the mouth. The other edge of the mouth, notice it's to the left of the nose edge, right? Slightly in from the nose edge. So now I know that this is the nose edge here. I'm gonna come in slightly in from the nose edge there. And now we have the mouth line and its right and left parameters, or its distance there. See how easy that is? I hope that's easy for you. I'm just gonna guesstimate the distance. It's not guesstimate, let's give you a solid answer. What's the edge of the sideburns to the little bit of the ear that shows up there? That looks to me about an eye, maybe a little bit more, something a little bit bigger than an eye. So if her eye is going to be about that big, I'm going to say a little bit bigger than that. I'm going to come out this way, and now I know that her ear from here to where the sideburn is, that distance is about the same as that. It's as low as, and then I'm going to just look at the nose line. It's a little higher than the nose line, which is right here, so a little bit higher than the nose line. And there we go, you get like a box sort of effect. From this edge to the sideburn, her jaw is pretty much in the center of that space, right? So in the center of this space, so I'm just kind of boxing things up. I guess I should call this a boxing method, although it's really called the way I use it is kind of like a boxing method in the sense that it has, you know, boxes everywhere. That angle there, but it's basically using the tried and true technique that the masters used called comparative measurements. And so now I'm just going to kind of rough in the jaw very, very lightly, guys. I'm not drawing hard. I'm never pressing hard with my pencil, and notice that the whole time I've been holding my pencil like this prevents me from getting super heavy lines that later on you would have just a nightmare to try and erase. So something like that. Her chin line goes like that, and the neck comes in like that. So her mouth, the corner of her mouth kind of curls around. The corner of her mouth goes curling around like so. And there's the outside of that. So I was a little off. And again, this is all just rough sketching, kind of guesstimating things. That's pretty much the center of her mouth, almost. And that's where her neck kind of comes out, right there. A little bit past this jaw is this neck over here on this edge, and it kind of angles inward like so. And it angles back out the other way slightly. Her shoulder line comes like so, and it's just below the mouth line, roughly around there. It's very important you get the shoulder line correct and the right angle. If you don't, you'll end up having someone look like they're really stressed out or constipated or something. All right, so I'm gonna take a quick break, pick my kids up from school, and take a look at so far how far I've gone. It's been a good hour or so. I'm not sure, I think 45 minutes or something. And this is a great time to stop, because look how early in the game we can check ourselves and start double checking these proportions. Make sure I'm not off, make sure I didn't screw something up and start drawing on the nose line where the eyes are or whatever. This is a good time to take a break. Every 30 minutes to an hour, no more than an hour I would say for you guys, stop, set a little timer on your phone, or egg timer, whatever you got. And the minute the alarm goes off, stop what you're doing and go and take a break. Take a break from this and do some checking. Okay, I know it doesn't sound like fun, but it's less fun screwing up and saying, damn, I wish I could have taken 10 minutes and checked it. Okay, so I'm going to stop with that little hair, and I'll start back up a little bit, and we'll get going again. All right, so I sat back down just now and I'm looking at the portions. And so, like I said earlier, it's right now very early in the game. We can take a look at all our proportions and make sure that things look right. Now you can just sit back like I did before I started recording just now, and I look at it from a distance with the picture next to it. And it's important to do that because at a distance you'll see things that you just won't see when I'm up close to it, because when we draw, we're 18 inches to maybe 2 feet away from the actual surface, and that's just a little bit too zoomed in that your brain has a hard time taking in all this information. So sitting back 6, 10, 12 feet, whatever, I just sit on the couch behind me and I look at it, and I just kind of look at these spaces, and then I use my finger very much like you've been seeing me do like this on the video and do all that same thing, and I just kind of use my tip of my thumb to the tip of my pencil or stick or whatever you got, and I just kind of compare things. You know, that piece is a little bit bigger than that, this one's a little smaller than that, this was the same as that, and I just kind of go through the big bulky stuff, like, you know, the forehead, which would be the top third, comparing it to the center third, that's your eyebrow to nose, and then compare some, you know, one of those with, say, the bottom third, which is the nose to the chin, and you just kind of go through this process of getting the big masses, those big pieces, and making sure that they are in proportion to each other when compared to the photo, because there's no point in continuing on from this point here and drawing real pretty eyes and a nice nose and everything else, because you can have the most beautiful eyes and nose and everything drawn on here, but if those big masses aren't proportionate to each other according to what the picture or your subject, if you're drawing from life, is showing you, then it doesn't matter. It's not going to look like that person, or it's going to not be as accurate. So this right here is the most important, most crucial point. So I wanted to start with the shoulders today, and it's important that you get the angle of the shoulders. Shoulders don't go straight out, we're not robots, but they also don't go straight down like this bizarre angle. I've seen people do that, right? Like you see my pencil, that's a broken shoulder, that's a car accident. There's no way in hell you're gonna be shaped like that. Shoulders are gonna come out generally in that angle, more or less, but you know, if you don't know, you just put your pencil up against your paper and just try to memorize that angle. You know, hold your hand still and just say, oh, okay. All right, I got close. And that's all you need, you just gotta get close. And then you wanna compare that point where the shoulder starts to intersect with the edge of the face. And you say, well, where does that intersect? Well, I'm pointing to it right there. That's more or less where the shoulder intersects with the face. And it's just below the mouth line. The mouth line and the chin. If you go right in the middle of that space, or roughly around here, that's roughly where the shoulder comes out. So somewhere between, halfway between the mouth and the chin. So somewhere around here is where it intersects with the face. So I just need to bring my shoulder down just a little bit. Same angle, I just gotta lower the line. Now I'm drawing that beautiful lady's shoulder. I'm not drawing something that I made up. I'm not drawing something that I think it's right. I don't need to think it's anything. By that I mean I don't need to assume anything. A lot of people draw with assumptions, and that's why they run into trouble. So let's go over here to the right shoulder. So this right shoulder made of 2 angles, and that's not because of the shoulder. Obviously, it's because the collar has this angle, and then the shoulder comes out of the collar right here where I'm pointing to, and it comes off like this. So where does this collar, where's the top of this collar right here going behind her hair? We can just guesstimate that. It's really not hard, but we can tell it's off to the left of the ear, obviously, and it's just a little bit lower than the earlobe, and pretty much in line with the bottom of the nose, roughly. So as long as we're roughly with the bottom of the nose and just below the earlobe, here's the earlobe, here's my bottom of my nose. So I'm gonna go with the bottom of my nose thing, and I'm just gonna draw a little horizontal line like this, really light. Again, I'm holding my pencil just like this, let it float. And just a little over to the left. So I'm gonna make like a little intersecting line. How far over I think that collar is gonna be? I'm gonna say around there. So when it intersects this horizontal line that I just put for the elevation of this point, then it angles off like that angle right there. Whatever this angle is, I don't know, 42 degrees, whatever the heck that is, I don't really care. And it comes off like that. this angle stops and then it becomes the shoulder roughly right here. So where is this? Well, excuse me. Again, we can just use a plumb line and just hold my stick horizontally. And we see that that roughly is right below the mouth line. So I'm gonna go a little bit below the mouth line, hold it horizontal, and I'm gonna draw a line like that. And where this line intersects this horizontal line that I just made, now I know that's where that intersects. And then that gives me the angle, or the beginning point for this angle down here for the shoulders. So that is roughly that angle, something like that. That looks pretty good. Now the collar, I'm gonna get a piece of tape because that's the angle I'm sitting at, so I don't block the screen. Is a little tough and it keeps, can't see this here. There we go. All right. So you saw how easy that was. And then you can apply this whole vertical and horizontal plumb line concepts to anything, right? To a body, to an object, if you're doing still life, just to figure out where things are. So let's get the angle of this collar. So it's about that angle like that. So kind of held my hand still more or less, doesn't matter. And I'm thinking it's this kind of angle. Notice how it's very loose, very sketchy. But I don't know how big this collar is, right? I'm just guesstimating. Now, there are two ways of doing it. You can make a measurement from the right here where the collar begins, and then just measure down to its lowest point, and say that is that's that big roughly, and say that's the same as, and then we can go to the face and say that's the same as. Let's see what 2 points touch. It's roughly from eyebrow to the top of the head is almost exactly the same. So from the eyebrow to the top of the head, then I come over here, put it to the edge of this collar that I just did, and now I have a rough estimate, pretty accurate rough estimate, of how low this collar is. And then it goes like this, and the corner kind of cuts in and does that angle. Now I said there are two ways. All I did was measure this edge, right? And I compared it to the face, and I said it's the same as, in this case, eyebrow to the top of the head. Really simple. Another way, say the bottom of a chest or breast or a necklace or whatever. Another way of getting the exact same answer. Okay, this is like giving you the saying, say I was teaching you a kindergarten or somebody young how to do math. And I said 2 plus 2 is 4. Well, so is 3 plus 1, right? So this is like saying 2 plus 2 is 4, and now I'm going to teach you 3 plus 1 is 4. Same answer, just a different way of getting it. You can measure from the chin down to this collar's lowest point, and if anything, if you do both, then one checks the other, and you should get the same answer. So from the chin to the bottom of that collar is roughly that big. And say, what's the same as that? And so you can go and start checking what this is the same as. And it's roughly the same as nose to eyebrow. So roughly nose to eyebrow should give me something pretty similar in my answer to what I got here. And here was my lowest point, and here was my new lowest point, and it's roughly the same darn thing. So that's a good way of checking yourself. If you got the answer for both of the ways of doing it, gives you the same exact answer, then you're doing it right. Your proportions are correct. Okay, they're roughly the same. Now, if you're way off, I mean, if you're just a hair off, that's no big deal. If you're way off, an inch, okay, something somewhere you screwed up bad. So that's how you would get the same exact answer. And so let's see the collar. It folds. Because it's a black shirt, I'm gonna just kind of straighten this out, make it nice and round, just to make it easier on myself. You don't have to. The collar of that t-shirt is a little bit higher than the bottom of this collar of the shirt that she's wearing over it. So this is the bottom here. So I'm gonna go a little higher. Let's erase that other line so we don't get confused. And that's roughly where that t-shirt is. So or the lowest point of that t-shirt. So where does this collar and t-shirt, where they meet here, come out of the face? Well, let's use a vertical plumb line. And when we put that vertical plumb line up there, it roughly runs, let's see, I'd say somewhere just a little bit to the left of the tear duct, somewhere around here. And so I'm just gonna do this, hold that up like that, and it comes out of the chin around there. And it should look something roughly like what I see, a little bit off to the chin, a little bit off the chin, yeah. So I'm pretty darn close. And then this angle here, just kind of roughing it. And again, the whole time I've been drawing with a B pencil, a B. Sometimes I use an HB, same thing. Just as long as it's not dark, but not so light that you can't see it. And so this t-shirt comes around this way. Now let's just say that maybe it was a V-neck rather than a U-neck or whatever it's called, right? If this was a V-neck, it would kind of come like this, and then it'd be a sharp point, and then it come back up. We've got a sharp point only because her shirt is folded over a little bit. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but let's just say it was a V-neck. How would I figure this out? Well, plumb line it. We already know how the elevation, where it is here, how low it is from the chin. We already did that. Where is it from left to right? And so roughly in the center of the right eye. Double check this, let me see. Roughly in the center of the right eye, a little left to center. So right around the center, or maybe a little to the left of that center, is that point there. And so now it becomes connect the dots, that to that. And then it comes up like this. And then the collar on this side, I'm just gonna keep drawing it. Notice it's narrower here, and then it opens up like a funnel, becomes thicker around here. So I'm just gonna eyeball that. Like so. And then the shirt comes out like that. Now this is very, very light. And like that. And then like this. And so now I'm gonna just do a little cleanup work. Get rid of some of these little lines that I was using to figure out where things were. Just because it becomes a little difficult to know what line meant what. And so that does that. Just putting in those little lines for the wrinkles of the shirt. And this does that. And then the angle of that shirt looks like I'm a little bit too far to the right. I gotta go come a little bit in. And so there's that. A little lower than this shoulder is the top of this collar. And notice this collar is over the same thickness here roughly throughout the whole thing. So keep that in mind. More or less, it opens up just a little bit, not a whole lot. And it was more towards the bottom that starts to open up. And then somewhere around here, the collar folds over. Now I probably won't do all these wrinkles and folds and just all this really time-consuming, tedious stuff, because it's not really what I'm trying to do. This is just more of a lesson in drawing, portraiture, and drawing lesson in general, because you could use the skills, as you can see. You can apply that, everything I'm teaching here, you can apply it to anything. Literally, I mean, that's not a boast, that's not anything. This is how the old masters drew. This is how new masters draw, right? All these books and videos on how to draw sheep and goats and people, and that's all fine and dandy, but they're not done differently. Everything is drawn the exact same way. There's no different techniques for me, at least for me. I don't use something different when I go draw a horse. I did a beautiful horse portrait. I want to say it was a couple years ago, and I sold it. I didn't use something different for that horse. It was the exact same thing that I did here. I found the top of the horse and the bottom of the horse's snout. It was a large, on this sketchbook right here, in fact, it was a large horse's head like that. And then I just kind of, broke it down to its proportions, how low where the eyes from the top of the ear, etc. And it just went down the exact same system. The only thing that changed is it went from a human to a horse. That's it. And I measured the width of the horse's head the exact same way I did the width of her head, and in this case her face, and compared it to the vertical. It's really, I hate to say it's that easy, but it's that easy. And obviously you're not going to be, you know, awesome, successful drawer that first day you grab a pencil just because you're following what I'm saying. You're still going to fail and you're going to make a lot of mistakes because it's a way of seeing and you just got to get yourself used to it. But once you do, it just comes naturally, and it just easily just comes to you. You'll just understand. Now notice that her hair is this angle right back here, and I'm just gonna shoot for some straight lines, roughly. And then it shoots from this angle and then kind of shoots to that angle right here on that line there. Where is this? Well, I'm gonna put that little, where this angle meets this angle, I'll just put a horizontal plumb line like so. It's just above the eyebrows, about center forehead. So the center of her forehead, I just kind of go across this way. Now I know that's that angle where it changes is right there. That's where the angle changes, and it goes roughly this angle. I'm just gonna kind of hold my pencil as best I can, and I was coming in a little too much. Nice. And then I went to the top of her head is actually all those little strands of hair, so the thickest part of her head is quite a bit lower, about a third of the way lower. So I'm just gonna bring that down a little bit. And then look at the head. It goes this angle and this angle. And if I were to look at where they converge, I can take my plumb line and say it's just to the left of her right eye. So just to the left of the right eye, roughly, is where I'm just going to put way up here. I'm just going to put a little vertical line. I'm just going to converge this angle, and then roughly take an eyeball measurement of this thickness of the hair right here and her angle there, and it becomes that convergence there. And then it comes in like this and like this, and her glasses make up the stem of her glasses, make up the edge of her hair roughly. So the glasses are a little bit of a pain because they magnify things. Like her bony structure of the cheek here is being overemphasized by her glasses. When you look at the hair, it takes up the entire lens, and yet only this little strand is popping out. That's just, you know, that craziness. I forget the scientific word for what glass does, where it either shrinks depending on your prescription or enhances or makes larger for the viewer that's seeing through the glasses. For us looking at her, right, it's making, whatever her prescription is making things larger. And so it's overemphasizing the boniness of her facial structure. I know this lady, I've met her. She's not this bony here. It's just, it's being magnified. Then you can see that in the hair. It stops right at the edge of the lens, and then over here, there's got a little tuft of hair. So just be aware of that. It's a little bit of a pain, but you know, it is what it is. And right here at this bony structure, in where it meets the outside of her jaw right there, that's pretty much where the glass lens is. I'm just gonna use that area and then drop in this line for where the glass is gonna be. Okay, I'm gonna continue to draw the shape of her hair a little bit, just like that. And does this, and it does that. And so there's a nice little guesstimate of where things go. So I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup work. Notice I'm using my kneaded eraser. A little cleanup work here. I'm going to take out the initials that I had spoken about earlier in the video at the beginning. The eyebrow line, the eye line, all that nonsense. I don't need that anymore. Oh, that's the shoulder line. I need that. And there we go. We got her head nice and structured. We got things looking the way they're supposed to look roughly. And here's her jawline here. And here is your earlobe. It does something like this. Now, I'm gonna rush this drawing only because, again, I'm doing a video. I just kind of want to get done. It's very difficult sometimes to draw accurately and talk and teach all this stuff and video and try to be at an angle where I'm actually very uncomfortable right now, and try to get this information into your head. But if I'm watching this video and I enjoy what I'm seeing, my advice to you would be slow down and draw at the pace that you can think, not at the pace you want to be at. Never emphasize speed, because the faster you go, the slower you'll be. Fast is slow, slow is fast. What does that mean? If I go too fast and my brain simply can't process that information, I'm just kind of doing guesswork at that point. What ends up happening is you end up taking more time later on destroying your paper as you're erasing constantly, because you went so fast. I made so many mistakes that now you have to spend a ton of time fixing the drawing and doing it over and doing this over, and now you got to erase this. It's just more of a nightmare. It's no longer fun because you're not drawing anymore. You're not doing any work. You're simply you're just fixing. You're not working, and that isn't any fun. So go as slow as you need to understand. This is a very comprehensive video, very instructive. I'm slowing things down dramatically. I can usually get to this point in probably 15-20 minutes. It doesn't take me that long, not because I'm trying to go fast, but only because I can understand the information. I have enough experience doing it that I can move quicker than someone who doesn't have the information in their head. So it's not a matter of me moving fast because I am trying to move fast. I am faster than some people only because I understand it better than they do, or at least I'm used to it better than they are, or more than they are, more practice than them, whatever. So if you're just starting out, or you've been frustrated for years and you're trying to get into this, go slow, let things naturally come out at whatever speed that is. You'll just wake up one day and you'll work, and you'll suddenly find yourself moving through the process much faster, not because you were trying to move faster, but because you were understanding the information so much better that you can move faster naturally. You're just moving faster by nature rather than forcing it. If you see yourself trying to move fast out of frustration, you're like, oh my God, I want to get this done, oh my God. That's a sign right there that you're going too fast. And you'll make a lot of mistakes. I've seen people that could be much better artists. They could be really, just incredible, but they're so impatient to get it done that instead of producing really nice work, they're producing, okay work at best, because they're just not patient. They're just moving so fast. I look at their work and what's wrong with it? Why is this going on? Why is that? And I'm looking at it like, I can tell you we're just moving so quick. And I see people draw right in front of me and I'm like, wow, you're way ahead of everybody, but like by way ahead. And sure enough, they have the most amount of mistakes. And then those people don't ever improve much because they're so set in their ways, and there's no point in me arguing. And they just won't listen, and they just keep moving at that pace. Knock yourself out. If that's you, you're just gonna suffer and you're gonna move too darn fast, and you're gonna always be paying the price for it. So, my opinion, you should move a lot slower than whatever your current pace is. Slow it down to even more than whatever it is right now. If it's taking you 4 hours to do it, it should take you probably then 6 or 8 hours. Okay, so enough of that. So now that I got all this, the design, I call this the design stage, where I'm just kind of building my little blueprint here, trying to get an idea of where things go. And I got a really accurate system that I've been developing over the years, where I'm really getting to at least know pretty accurately where things are supposed to be. And that's the whole purpose. You want to be at a point where you at least know where to put things. Right now, I think it's pretty safe to say that it is roughly looking like her, at least in proportions. But we don't have the details in. So now we got to do the shape of the eyes, the nose, the mouth. Those are things that I leave for the dead last. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little demo. I don't want to ruin this, so I'm just going to get a little scrap piece of paper. And I'm going to do a little eye, mouth, and nose demo. Really quick one to show you really fast how I design the eyes and all that. Really, the eyes are the most important in my opinion, and it's the more difficult ones. The nose and the mouth, there's just not a lot there. They're very easy. But I'll go over that, and we'll discuss that for a little bit, and then you'll be able to see how we design the eyes, the nose, and the mouth so it looks like that person. All right, so give me a minute. I'll be right back. All right, so I went to the printer and just got me a little scrap piece of paper. Here's a photograph. Trying to make this video. I've had it over here. It's kind of tough for me to see in this angle because I'm way over here to the left, so it's kind of tough for me. So I had to change things up just a little bit just so I can see. So let's go over here and let's start off with the eye. That's usually the toughest one. So we already remember doing in the very beginning of this video, we had that whole eye line thing, right? The pupil line, eye line, whatever. And so we knew more or less where the elevation was for the eye. So let's just imagine there was the eye line there. And we determined that the eye, now I'm going to make this a much larger eye because I want you to be able to see it. So let's just say that the eye was supposed to be, and I'm just guesstimating this, I'm just going to do just something that roughly resembles her eye. It doesn't really matter whose eye, I could just be making up eye. The same rules apply. And so we determined the eye was that wide, and let's just say that the eye was supposed to be roughly that big. Let's just say that that's how big we decided that it was supposed to be. When we go look at the eye, and then I suggest you do the same box, right? The reason I have a box on my paper is because you're supposed to have a box on your photograph. Use a little a ballpoint pen or something if you can't see your pencil, but whatever. And then in that box you say, hey, you know what? The corner where the two eyelids meet, the corner of the eye is lower than halfway on the left side of this box. So if I come over here on the left side of this box, a little lower, right? You just kind of estimate that. I'm just going to draw a little dot right there. A little lower than halfway is where we're going to say, I hope you can see that. I'm just going to put X. Let me see on the video. Hopefully you can see that. A little lower is where, a little lower than halfway along this elevation here is where I see the corner of her eye. And then right at the bottom right corner of the box, right in here, is where I see the tear duct. Now, in your case, for your own self-portrait or your picture of whoever, your mom, your sister, whoever, or your dad, you know, those elevations will change, right? Maybe somebody who's Asian may have the corners of the eyes a little higher than halfway, or right around halfway, or somewhere a little higher than that. And that's what makes that look like they're slightly more slanted and more stretched out. That's a physical characteristic that they have in that particular race. But regardless, you want to check. And the best way I found is to put these little boxes around things. Okay, that little boxing method that I was talking about earlier. That way I can come over here to my drawing and say, okay, so on my left side, a little lower than halfway is where I'm seeing the corner of the eye. The tear duct falls right into the bottom right corner. Oh, that's good to know. In this box, right in the middle from left to right is the edge. From left to right, the entire box, I'm going to cut it in half. That's where the edge of this iris is. The iris is that circular thing in your eye that people say, wow, you got beautiful brown eyes or green eyes. Okay, that's where we get our colors and the iris. The pupil is that little black dot in the iris. And so you can see in this box, I hope you can see that. My pencil's not making a very dark line. Right halfway in the middle of that, right, or halfway into that box, in the middle of it, is where that iris is. So now I know the iris can't go further than that line. Then I look at the overall shape. And I just say, you know what? This eye comes up like this and then starts to cut down in this angle like so. And then it drops down. I apologize if I have my arm in your way. I'm trying my best to draw without getting in the way of your video. And it comes down to that tear duct. And then this corner, I'm gonna do the bottom eyelid, and it cuts into the box like so. Keep in mind, this is just a really rough estimate of her eye, but it's gonna be the same idea, same principles. And there you go. And then her iris is less circular up here, as the iris most of the time, and unless you're freaking out or somebody has a medical condition or something, the top of your iris is being cut about a quarter to a third of the way down, because that iris, you know, say my circle here is your iris, the eyelid is covering it. The upper eyelid, that's the one that does all the work. The bottom eyelid, it just drinks all day, it doesn't do a darn thing. It just, the bottom eyelid just kind of sits there, barely moves. The top eyelid is what comes down and, you know, opens your eyes or shuts your eyes. The reason I say that is because in certain situations, when you start looking at the wrinkles on the corner of the eye, crow's feet, all that sort of thing, it comes off that upper eyelid, not upwards from the bottom eyelid, okay? It's usually gonna come from the upper eyelid as it's laying on top in that corner. It lays on top of the bottom eyelid. It all depends on the thickness of your eye, other factors, but in general, that's the truth and that's the way it works. Okay, so the iris is not that circular on top, touches this edge, and then it comes down and it becomes much more circular from halfway through that circle down. So you can see a little bit of this curve right here. Now, if I were to finish this circle, and I suggest you do if you don't know how to do this accurately, see that circle? That circle is the iris. Excuse me, yes, in the iris. Now, in that center of this circle, like you were Superman, you had X-ray vision, and you were able to see through the upper eyelid and see the rest of this iris. The center of this iris is where the pupil, that little black dot, is going to be. Now, you'll notice that because the eyelid comes down, the pupil ends up always being, in probably 9 times out of 10 in most portraitures, your pupil is going to be closer to the upper eyelid rather than the lower eyelid. And again, that's because the bottom of your pupil is, for the most part, exposed. Sometimes the bottom eyelid will cut into it a little bit, but for the most part, it's kissing the very bottom edge. And so because the eyelid comes down towards that pupil, it is closer to the pupil. So in other words, when you draw a pupil, make sure you draw it in the center of the iris, not in the center of your eye opening, which is what I see a lot of people do. They'll do it in the center of their eye opening, and it looks really bizarre, okay? Because then you got a pupil that's not really in the center of an iris, it's over to the side and off, and it just looks really bizarre. And so, put a little shading there just so you guys can see it. And do a little bit of cleanup work. And in general, that's it. That's all the work that an eye takes. Okay, now you're gonna have certain things like, for example, the bottom shelf of the eye, that eyelid thickness. Your eyelid has a certain thickness, and so you'll have this little fleshy pink sort of space. That's the thickness of your eyelid. And then in her case, you can see the thickness of her upper eyelid just because of the way that her face is built and the way she is. You can see usually though, in most cases, you cannot see the thickness of the upper eyelid because the upper eyelid usually, in this case, she has her head slightly tilted down, and so she opened up her eyes wide to look up at me. And in that, and then just the way she's also, because of the way she's built, you can see the upper eyelid's thickness, that shelf inside. I call it a shelf, but whatever. But in most cases, in most, I'd say probably 99% of the time, you don't see the thickness of the upper eyelid. You don't see that pinky flesh in most instances, unless the angle is such that it might do that. But in most cases, you don't. And all you see is just a flat, bushy line. And the reason it's bushy is because of the what do you call it? The hair. The eyelashes. And so the eyeball right there, I didn't really stick with the proportions of that box because I just kind of made it up on the fly to make this little demo, but you get the idea. And so this is her eye in ginormous form here. Not ginormous, but zoomed in. And then the upper little crease there for the eyelid as her eyeball sinks into her skull. And it does something like that. And then the bag, make sure you got the right distance there under the eye. I call it the bag, you know what I mean? A little crease there, a little wrinkle or whatever. Comes down. And in general, just as a general idea, general rule, I guess you could call it, the bag under the eye is about, its elevation, how low does it go? It's about one eye's height down or a little bit more. In this case, it's just a little bit more. So just so you know, so when you draw, you don't want to draw the bag of the eyes like right there, right below it. Okay, it could be there. It's a little wrinkle there, okay? There's nothing wrong with that. But the general big bag that we all get with age, that bag right there, that wrinkle, whatever you call it, is generally about 1 to 1 and something eyes height down. So from the inside of your eye, if I were to measure that height, it's about 1 to 1.5 roughly. And so, and then the wrinkles and little lines and anything else you may need to add, you would add them. And the shading, of course. And so there you go. Now, when it comes to shading an eye, you have to remember that the thickness of the eyelid is going to cast a shadow down on the eyeball, right? The inside part, the eyeball. So the top of your eyelid, excuse me, of your eyeball on the inside, just below your upper eyelid, is going to be usually slightly darker than the bottom and center of the eyeball. And that's, again, light comes usually from the top down, and when that light hits, that thickness of your eyelid casts a shadow down on your eyeball. Now your eyeball itself is so light in color that it's going to reflect light, and that's why the shadow won't be very dark. But just so you know, keep it in mind, it's a little darker up in there. And so for being a really quickie demo for an eye, that's how I construct an eye. So we start off with the two eyelids meet on this imaginary box that we did, and then compare that height with the height of the tear duct, and we can see on her the corner of the eyes are significantly higher than the tear duct, just like mine. And then we went in and did the where the edge of the iris is. We found that it was about halfway between the left and right, so I drew a little line, give me a border, and then I just started shaping things, and I just follow the shape that I see here. Don't do a generic, almond shape, because not everybody's shaped that way. Don't do this, because I've seen people do this, and that's a spider from Mars. I don't know what the hell that is. That's not an eye. So don't do that. Don't fall into the trap of assumptions. Don't assume anything. If you start drawing and you start making a mark based on an assumption, you're really getting into the realm of nightmares. You don't want to do that, because you'll just assume because a person is black or white or female or young or old or whatever. You start building these assumptions, you'll end up making something that doesn't resemble that person. So don't let your brain take over and let all these assumptions come into play. Rather, always be in control of the situation. Always be in control of what's going on. Every mark that you make needs to have an explanation. You did this because of this reason. You did that because of this reason. If you can't explain why you did that curve or why you did that line, then you likely just guessed. And then guessing that's just not good. Okay? I mean, we all guess to a certain extent. You just don't want to over guess, and you're constantly guessing, because that just becomes a disaster. So make sure that you have a real idea of what you're doing before you go do it. Okay, so let's go do a mouth and nose. So I'm just going to do the nose over here. So let's just say the nose was this big. Okay, I'm just going to draw a width to a nose. And the bottom of the nose was here. And we decided the top of the nostril was going to be right around there, whatever your box is when we were drawing in the initial stage. Okay, so I'm just making up a box. And I said, hey, you know what? In this case, you know what? The nose is looking away from us. And so I'm going to give you a nose. I'm not going to draw this nose. I'm going to draw a nose as though somebody's looking straight at you, just so I can make a much better explanation for you. Most noses. And then you can apply that to any angle you want. So let's just say that the nose was this wide, and in general, a nose, I'm just gonna do kind of like a cartoony thing, is just a big ball with two little circles that are slightly higher than its lowest point. I'm just gonna say about there, okay? And they just kind of intersect that larger ball. That's basically what a nose is. It almost looks like the Mickey Mouse symbol, you know, this black circle and then the two little black circles. Imagine the two little black circles fell down, and just before it hit the bottom of that big circle, it stopped. That's basically the best way. You can tell I take my kids to Disney far too much, but that's a different story. And so maybe the shape of that person's nose, now that we got that in there, is such that you go like this, and we said that the nose is more or less the center of that, so we need that little beefy, meaty little area between the two nostril holes. Make sure you have that little area there. So don't just, draw your little nostrils right up against it. Okay, so this is just a little bit of basic anatomy kind of thing for artists, right? You don't need to buy a big, 4-inch thick book and read it. None of that's going to help you ultimately to draw better. And so here's just a generic nose I made up on the fly. I hope this is useful and teaches you something. And so there it is, the outside shape. Now the ball of the nose sticks out. If you were to turn a nose sideways, it sticks out further than the little ball for the nostril. And so this ball here, say the light is coming from, let's just say the light's coming from this way. So then the ball of the nose could be, and this can vary wildly depending on how the person's nose, how big it is, the shape of it. They got a big ball, little ball, big nostrils, wide nose. There's a million things that can happen. I'm just going to do a generic thing, and then you can just apply however you need to. So on this side of the nostril, it can be shaded a bit, but in the center I'm going to leave it open because the light bounces, and because the nose has cartilage and stuff like that, just like your ears, what ends up happening, it's very translucent, and so light can travel through it. And so you'll have funky stuff going on with your shading that may confuse you because you're saying, man, this is in this dark area and it's pretty light. Why is that? Well, that's because the nose is so translucent that when the light travels through it, not to mention it can bounce off the flesh all around it back up into the nose, it shows a little bit light in the dark areas. And so a lot of times you'll see along the edge of the nostril holes, right, your little booger holes here, along that upper edge of it, a lot of times you'll see that it's not as dark as you would assume, considering that the light's coming this way. You would think everything on this side is dark, right? Pitch black to gray to whatever. But a lot of times in the nose, you'll see that and you'll say, it's confusing. Why is there this little light area along the nostril holes, which is right underneath? If anything, it's going to be darker. And that's, again, light transmitting through that material, the cartilage of the nose, and therefore it lightens it up. I'm just cleaning up a little bit of these little marks that I made earlier so I can do a little bit of shading for you. And then light shading will show like a little tiny bit of indentation. More shading would make it look like it's even further into the face, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so very basic nose. Not a whole lot of rocket science there. This hopefully didn't confuse you or anything. I wish I would have done the nose in the center now that I think about it, because the mouth kind of plays into it. But so let's just say that the mouth is right here from edge to edge. Let's just say that's the mouth right there. And so you look at a person's mouth, and again, I'm going to do a mouth that's looking at us rather than her mouth, because hers is turned that way and I don't want to confuse anybody. But you'll just be able to apply the exact same thing, like what I said about the nose, to a mouth that is turned a little off or whatever. So you look at somebody's mouth, and that can vary a lot, from really thick lips to a thin upper lip and a big bottom lip to very thin lips to whatever. The main thing is you need to understand how high is the upper lip. I'm just going to invent something. And how low is the bottom lip. right? And you can take that size and compare it to the overall width of the mouth on the photograph of that individual and say, oh, it's a third of the width, for example. And so then you take a third of your drawing, which is probably going to be bigger than your photo. So a third of that is equal to its height, or its half, or whatever the distance is. That's using your comparative measurements. That way you have a box, the same concept of box that I was talking about earlier, that I applied to the eye, that I applied to the nose, I'm applying it to the mouth. So there's my lightly drawn box. So we're going to call this the corners of the mouth. You look at the box and you say, you know, that person's center, right? I go to the extremes and I say, okay, so the center, the corner of the mouth is a little lower than, say, let's just say that's halfway. The corner of the mouth is a little lower than halfway along the edges on this particular individual. It could be right on halfway, it could be lower, a lot lower, whatever. I'm just making somebody up. And you say, you know what, the mouth line, or right where the two lips meet, is right at the halfway point, right between the top and bottom. Let's just say they were equal lips, right there. And so the mouth maybe travels upwards slightly for that little dip that we call the philtrum, and I'll talk about that here in a second. But here's that little dip that a lot of us have. Some people it's flat, some people have a very pronounced little dip. You just try your best and see that line that we call the mouth line. Don't worry about the shape of the lips right now. Worry about this mouth line. If you get this mouth line right, you can sell the idea of the lips that you made much more. And okay, nobody will question it as much, because this mouth line has to be in the right angle and everything else. And so there's that mouth line on this individual that I'm inventing in my head. And you look at the upper lip and you'll notice that its little dip corresponds more or less with this lower part of the upper lip right here, and its dippiness, if that's a word. And notice that this peak here and this peak here should correspond with the peaks in your upper lip. Okay, that's that meat going like this. Okay, so it needs to make sense. And say that the upper lip went like this, and then it maybe went like this. This is called the philtrum, that little dip just above your lip, that little dippy area. Okay, when you see that and you're going to draw it, here's a little tip that I always try to remember. The corner of the upper lips, the little top, not the corners, but the little peaks right here, they should roughly correspond with the center, more or less, of your nostril holes, the booger holes. They're roughly in that vicinity. So this, if I were to draw a mouth underneath this nose, those peaks should roughly be in the center of those nostril holes. And when I do that, you'll see that it looks like, even though I just invented this person, it looks anatomically correct, something that your brain responds to and says, yes, I can believe that. And that's really all you're trying to do. You're just trying to fool the eye of the individual that's, you know, looking at this and say, yes, I can believe that. That makes sense. The reason things stand out to us when we're looking at artwork and we're first starting out is a lot of times because of the mistakes. That's what's standing out to us. It's all the stuff that looks wrong because you got bizarre proportions. And so there's a little sketch of that lip there. So this lip here, and you just look at the bottom lip and the top lip, and you just try to do a shape that corresponds to the shape that you see. It's not always just a round thing or some bizarre, you know, straight line thing. It's, you know, look at it carefully and take your time. And you say, you know what, this comes in like this about a third of the way. Maybe it's more. I'm just inventing somebody. Don't use the proportions I'm talking about in every drawing because it's not going to apply to your Uncle Bob. And maybe this one comes in about a third away and then it flattens out. See how I just inventing somebody, I'm thinking, you know, about a third away from each edge is where that lip starts to flatten out, right? Or maybe it's more. Maybe it's less than a third or more than a third. Whatever it is for your particular model, don't just draw, you know, look at it and analyze it in the way I've been trying to teach you, okay? So I hope this little, before I continue, the upper lip 9 times out of 10 is going to be darker than the bottom lip. And the reason is because if I were to draw a lip for you, say right here, let's say that's a nose, and that's the philtrum. Let's say somebody in a side view. Here's the mouth. There's the upper lip. There's the bottom lip. And then here's the chin. Okay? Somebody, I'm just literally making it up. As the light comes down this way, right, or in any direction, it's gonna hit this upper part of your mustache area. The upper lip goes into our face, okay, pretty much from the day you're born. It's always constantly going towards your skull, therefore away from the light, and therefore a little bit darker. Now there's going to be reflected light from the bottom lip and everything else, but in general it's going to be darker and in more shadow than the upper lip, than the lower lip. The lower lip is almost constantly always in light, and that's the reason is because, watch this, right where they meet, the upper lip comes out. And so your upper lip is always coming out towards the light, coming away from your skull, and therefore receiving a lot more light. Now, if you have very thin lips, it could, that could change a little bit, but for the most part, in general, that's the rule that I try to stick to, okay? Because it just makes sense scientifically, right? Light hits us, and then the lip is going towards the face, and therefore away from the light, and then the bottom lip comes out of the face and towards the light, and therefore lighter. I hope this little eye, nose, and mouth demo was useful to you. I'm going to take a quick break and clean up a little bit, and then we'll get back to finishing her up. All right, so I'm back now to finish this up. By sitting back for a while, I'm able to determine quite a bit, and I'm liking the way it's coming out. I see a pretty decent resemblance, so I like all of that. But I want to mention that I didn't go too dark. You notice that the hair and most of the drawing, it's very light, and in that way it's a safer way of working, because I can then go in there and darken things. I obviously know it's too light, but by layering it and then getting slowly darker, you end up not getting into trouble later on. If I were to go too dark too quick, if I make a mistake, it's a nightmare to fix. Also, what I started doing was the proportions. I started checking them. I looked at her and she didn't look right. It looked like her head was too wide. So I just, off camera, before I turn it on, I shaved a little bit of the hair off, because it's like I made her hair too big. And then the actual face, I found that the ear, jaw, and neck, I don't know if it shows on camera, but I just drew a little sketchy line, bringing it in about, I don't know, a quarter inch or so. Because it looked off. It was too wide. It's like I made everything over here a little bit too far off. And the best way of doing that is to just sit back. I literally sat on the couch and I just looked at it from a distance, comparing from what I see here to here. And then I said, it just looks wrong to me. So when I wanted to check to see if it is wrong and that's just my eye or my brain playing games on me, I said, you know what, let me go check it out. And I measured from like the corner of the eye on the photo to the edge of the ear. And once I measured that, I compared it to something else. Remember, comparative measurements, that's our key thing. And then I checked over here and it didn't give me the same answer. So I said, okay, I got it way too big. And so I kind of got a couple measurements, and it roughly ends up being where I drew in this line. Now, hopefully I can make it happen and I can erase the previous information. So I'm gonna go in there. I did do it pretty light, so it should come right off. Shouldn't be a problem. And all this is gonna be in shadow anyways, so. So let's go down here. I'm going to use my B pencil. I'm just using 4B, a B, a 2B. I got an H. And I took out an 8B, although I don't necessarily use it. Thinking it might, maybe I really need to go dark. But there's really nothing that dark, except for maybe the shirt, her black t-shirt there. But I might not even draw that in, so we'll see. So I don't have a lot of pencils. You don't need a whole bunch. And so I want something that is lighter than the eyes, but darker than the skin tones. And it's always easier, okay, to work from light to dark. And I you'll hear artists say that, especially in the painting world, if you're into oil painting like I am, or acrylic, or pretty much everything, except for watercolor. Watercolor is the redheaded stepkid, right? That one's on its own little universe. It's on its own program. It's the opposite, actually. Watercolors, they tend to be better if you work from light to dark. But most of the time you want to work from from dark to light. And so I'm not going to go as dark as I think it is. I'm just going to go a little bit darker than it was before, and then stop shy of what I think it might be. I think it needs to be a little darker, but I like playing it safe. Okay? This is the way I try to work, because it's a lot easier to darken things than to go in and have to lighten it. Much easier. So I'm gonna just go in here And just underneath the eyelid, I'm going to darken that up a little bit. There's going to be a lot of gray tones that I'm going to have to put in here. Now, the part underneath the nose. A lot of times people will just let their brain take over what their eyes are seeing. My eyes are seeing reality. I'm seeing what is actually there versus what your brain says, which is usually the opposite of what you're actually seeing, or just not seeing, not that their brain is giving you the wrong information. So a lot of times people will draw the bottom of the nose super dark because they figure there's a nose, it's, you know, like a cliff hanging off, and that underneath that cliff it's got to be dark because the light's coming from the top. But if you look here, the nose underneath is not that dark. That bag is actually quite a bit darker than the area underneath the nose. So I'm going to darken it because I need to. It's too light on my drawing, but I'm not going to go as dark as this bag. Right? I keep calling it a bag, wrinkle, I don't know. I know this lady. I don't want to insult her, but super nice lady. But I don't want to go as dark as the bag. I just want to keep it a little bit lighter. And then the area right here to the left of the nostril, because that nostril is this piece of flesh that's sticking onto our face there. What that does, it kind of has like a little curve, that little curve and carved curve actually. And it's giving us a lot of shade here. So it's a lot darker. So this is similar in darkness, just adjacent to the nostril, as the bag. So I'm using my bag as like a key, like saying, okay, everything, I'm gonna kind of base everything on that. And I'm just gonna use my brush. You can use whatever brush you like. You get these at Michael's. I'm sure you go to Michael's, you'll see it, okay? It's the Artist Loft brand. I like these because they're kind of stiff, but not too stiff. If they're too soft, then they end up not doing anything. So you gotta be careful not to get anything that's too soft. And this ear, because it's all in pretty much a shade here, but it's a little darker here than here. You know, you can get really anal with this, okay? I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna get super anal with this because then you're gonna be there, you know, for years trying to finish one drawing. I'm not that interested in this drawing or any drawing that's gonna take me that long. And again, if you see the beginning of this video, you'll notice that the supplies, as in all my videos, whether it's the painting or the drawing, I try to use stuff that you can get at Michael's, and that's easy to get. I think Michael started selling these, at least the one in my area. I think I saw it the other day, which is funny. For years, I never saw these in there, these little click erasers. Then I started using them more often, and I started showing other people how to do this sort of thing. And all of a sudden, I started seeing these things pop up. So the local area will determine what that Michael's will carry. And I guess a lot of people started requesting those. Here's a fluffy brush, and this is not for blending. This is just when you have all those little eraser doohickeys that come off your pencil. And then, of course, this brush, and then this brush. This is from like a set of like 10. This is, I think it was like $5. Super cheap brushes. But they do the job. That's all that matters. It doesn't matter if you paid $100, which I would never do, or if you paid $5. The point is, does it work? Does it provide you with what you need? If the answer is yes, then it's good. So this area right behind the jaw here needs to be darker. I like that. Helps to push that neck back. That ear pops forward, and that jaw pops forward too. There's a little stray line that I got there. It actually works out right here on the earlobe. I don't know if you can see that. It kind of almost looks like this earring in the way that it looks right now. So I'm going to leave it there so I can then come back to it later and put in that earring. And again, I'm sticking with this B. That's providing me with pretty much everything I need. Notice how I'm holding my pencil, especially when I shade. I use that grip that I talked about in other videos, like that. I really, really have to be careful to not get too much pressure when it comes to shading. That's where you really have to be careful. Because what happens is if you apply way too much pressure, you're gonna get all these lines showing up that you may not want. So even the brush won't help you there if it comes out too dark. I use this larger brush. And everybody's seen these brushes. They come in smaller and wider and thinner. Cheapy 99-cent brush. Great for big areas. Softening an area. So drawing is basically a lot like painting in a lot of ways. Here is the shadow, the cast shadow from the glasses. The lighting wasn't too great. I wanted to draw somebody who I like very much, my friend here. Thank you, Carol, for letting me take that picture of you that day. And in that way, I don't have to worry about copyright, you know, nonsense and all that. And it's fun. It's always fun when you're drawing somebody you know. But as far as the stress level, it's probably a better idea to draw and paint people you don't know. Because you don't know them. You're not, it's a little less stressful because you're not telling yourself, it doesn't look like my Uncle Bob. Oh my God, oh my God. People stress out real quick. So I like to tell people, don't stress, man. Do people, you know, don't draw Oprah Winfrey or what was this one? Gerard Butler. I just saw that movie, Greenland. Great movie, by the way. Great movie. Watch it. It's one of those end of the world movies. Very good movie. You know, don't draw. You can. I'm not saying you should have. You know, when you draw somebody, you know, random strangers is like better, I think, when you're first starting off, because you know, who cares? You don't know this person. You know, I've been known to go up to people in the supermarket and tell them, "Hi, I'm sorry, my name is Robert, and I'm an artist, and would you mind if I took a picture of you? I might draw you or paint you one day. I'm just trying to get a collection of pictures. Would that be okay?" And most of the time, people are flattered, and they say, "Yeah, sure, knock yourself out." And I just get a collection of pictures that way. So, random people is always a very, very good idea. No stress, because you don't know this person at the supermarket, and you'll probably never see them again. Keeping my shading nice and light. She's not an angry person. I know in this picture it looks like she's an angry person. We were just joking around that day, and that was a look that she gave me, joking around. She's actually one of the sweetest people I've met. Very, very nice lady. So in the nostril, that's pretty dark, but notice how tiny the darkest part of her nostril is, right? You may be asking yourself, why is it so light underneath the nose and inside the nostril? There's a lot of factors. It all depends on the angle of the light, what you're wearing. Usually dark clothes will absorb light, whereas lighter clothes, say a white t-shirt, will reflect light back into your face. I really can't say that there's anything dark on her, anything light on her that's going to reflect. It could just be her skin tone, because she's a light-skinned person. Could be reflecting light back underneath her nose. Could be that, the surrounding area. Could be I think she's on a white table or something. It could all be, you know, all these little things are factors that are going to affect your light. Okay, you can't control all of it, so it's nice to know it, and then don't worry about it, because there's no point in worrying about something you can't control. And so here's that little area of hair in her glasses just adjacent to her cheek. So I'm gonna take a quick break and I'm gonna sit back for about 2 minutes and take this sweater off, because even in Florida it gets cold. And I'm gonna just look at it before I continue. It's always a good idea to stop every hour or so and just take a look at what you've done, because you're so zoomed in that when you sit back, 8, 10, 12 feet, and you look at it from a distance, you can see things with less clarity as far as details, and so you're able to just see the big masses and things will show up better. Okay, so I'm gonna do that now, and then I'll be right back. All right, so here in this part of it, I just want to talk about shading before I start on actual shading. So a little while ago, I was explaining how I was measuring things, kind of looking at things, trying to make sure that things look right. And I moved over her ear and her neck and part of the collar here. It's a good example of what you don't want to do. I had already put in a bunch of graphite, and so when I erased it looked white because the white of the paper would show through. And so not a big deal, but it's what I was talking about or way earlier in this video. When you start to erase out in the darks, now trying to make that area that you erased out match the surrounding shaded area, it's not impossible, but it is a heck of a lot harder. It's more work. So try not to do it if you can, but undoubtedly you're going to make a mistake and you're going to end up running into the same problems that I did, and you'll have to do that. So shading, when you're shading something, that's probably one of those things that people ask the most about. Shading is one of those things that you have to look at it the same way you do proportions. And what that means is you have to look at it as something that you can compare to something else. So for example, I'm just working on a few little touch-ups of things that I see need to get fixed while I talk. Shading, the way I like to approach it, I'll look at my subject, in this case this photo. I try to find the two extremes, the lightest lights and the darkest dark. The darkest dark would be her eyes right here inside her iris, her eyebrows comes a close second to that. This dark area behind her hair, or underneath her hair, I should say, adjacent to the forehead. And then this area underneath her right ear. Those areas are very similar in darkness, with the eyes being probably the darkest and the eyelids just above her eyes. Those are very similar, so they need to be around the same amount of blackness on my drawing. I can't have my eyes pitch black and then have the little areas like the eyebrows, the part right here adjacent to the forehead and back here, be so much lighter, because then it won't match and it won't make sense to what I'm seeing here. They don't have to be perfect like what you see in a photograph, and some people might print this out in black and white to help themselves to see value a little bit easier, and if that works for you, that's fine. I prefer color, and the reason is it's a good way to train yourself, because your ultimate goal, in my opinion, should be to draw from life. And in life, things are in color. You're not going to suddenly, find a pair of magic sunglasses and make everything black and white. I mean, maybe that exists, I don't know. But the point is, you're going to be drawing, hopefully, eventually, from life. And in life, everything's in color, not in black and white. So if you get too used to using a printer and printing things out in black and white, ultimately, that potentially can hurt your ability to learn, okay? But Do whatever you want. So those areas that I just talked about, they have to be similar in darkness. They have to be not only the darkest, but similar to each other in darkness on my drawing. So obviously I need to darken this part of the hair under here, way much more down here underneath her ear. And her eyebrows need to be slightly thicker, I'd say, especially on this one. And probably about that amount of darkness. And I'm gonna call that correct, I would say. Now, the lightest light would be probably on her skin, would be right around the nose area right here, just a little bit underneath the left eye right there, tiny bit around the forehead area, and of course where the light's hitting her right here. That's the lightest light. So everything else will be darker than those areas I just spoke about. So those other areas that aren't the super dark or the super light, they will be those little gray tones in between. Being that we're drawing on white paper, the way we're going to show white is by not drawing into that area. So the hair area, for example, I found this angle on my drawing to be a little off. So I'm going to just fix that a little bit. I feel like it needs to be up a little bit more. So in this area where I see there's a nice highlight there, if you look at the hair, really the brightest spot you can see is right there because there was some overhead lighting and it was hitting her right there. That's the area that needs to be the absolute lightest. And there's a patch of like white right there. So I'm gonna go like this and I'm just gonna erase out with my knead eraser, or if you have one of these little click erasers or one of these. Highly recommend them. And I wanna make sure that this is, notice I stroke it like this, just like the hair is. And I wanna make sure that those are gonna be the brightest spots.